Well, hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Newt News Podcast. We're in the divisional series of the playoffs right now. So I think last time I said you should go get some Marlins gear because they kept the Cubs out of the playoffs, but Skip Schumacher and the Marlins just got swept out of the playoffs. So maybe you go get your Rangers gear for Jordan Montgomery or your Orioles gear for Jack Flaherty, but you can't get your Cardinals gear for the postseason because they missed it. We all know that. We'll get into all of this, but Sandy, let's just start off by what are some quick playoff thoughts you have so far, just in general about the playoffs, and then maybe any of it, how it's impacted your view on the Cardinals for 2024.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. This probably isn't something everyone wants to hear, but I hate the playoffs when the Cardinals aren't involved. I force myself to watch the games that I watch, and I'm just kind of mad about the whole thing. So that's really whiny of me. And also, teams I really don't like are winning. The Phillies are winning. That really stinks. At least the Dodgers lost their first game, which is nice. We're probably going to have an all Texas affair, which me being in Waco right now, it's going to be brutal. Everyone I know is either an Astros fan or a Rangers fan, and they're all arguing with each other right now. But the big thing is really like the team construction in the playoffs here. All the teams that are succeeding are built to win in the playoffs, and they're built to have at least two very good pitchers, right? It's a lot like the Phillies last year, where they were able to throw Nola at us, and it's like there's not a lot we can do about that right now. Obviously, the Cardinals weren't built that way. You look at the teams involved, the Rangers, right? You have Eovaldi, Montgomery, the Diamondbacks. You have Gallen, Kelly, and then Fott, sort of, but that's really two guys and kind of a young unknown. And that's how all these teams seem to be built. The Cardinals don't have that at all. It's a huge reason that we're not able to compete with the best of the best.
Yeah, and you even look at the Rangers, the Dodgers, and the Rangers have Scherzer and DeGrom too, but they're just both out.
Yeah.
Like the Dodgers, they have Julio Urias, but that's kind of gone now. And
Yeah.
they had Walker Buehler. Like all these teams have even more arms than they have at their
Yeah.
disposal right now. And so I think it's really easy to see the link you're talking about here that the Cardinals need two starters, not just Miles Michaelis and Jose Quintana like they did last year. You need two top end guys who can really produce for you. So I think you and I have both seen a lot. People are hating on the Jordan Montgomery trade, saying like that's one of the guys they could have had. They gave him away. They didn't extend him. They extended Michaelis instead. We can debate the Michaelis extension. I think you could argue they shouldn't have done that either way. But what is your thoughts on them trading Jordan Montgomery? Was that a bad idea now that he's positioned in the playoffs, or is that still a good move?
Yeah, I'm really surprised to see this at all. The Jordan Montgomery trade was a masterclass for John Mozeliak. And I say this to somebody who has been an outspoken critic of Mo at times when I think he screws up. I don't think he screwed up here. If people don't like that deal, they don't understand the basic concept of buying and selling in baseball. When you're a bad baseball team and you have guys with limited control, which means they're not going to play for you next year, you need to get rid of them. You're not going to the playoffs. You're not getting any value out of them. So you mortgage the present. You get worse to get better in the future. And the guys they got back, again, John King looks like he's going to be a big part of this bullpen next year. He was great down the stretch. But much more importantly, Thomas Saggese and Tekoa Roby are probably going to end up in the top 100 overall prospects next year. There's a lot of buzz around these guys. Saggese in particular had maybe the best second half from a prospect I've seen since I started following this team. It was incredible how just dominant he was at AA, and then to move up to AAA and not skip a beat. Meanwhile, Roby looks really good in the fall league. I don't know. I think you got a lot of control. You got 12 years of control from guys who are probably really good for 2 months, 10 starts from Jordan Montgomery. And all of that came from injured Harrison Bader, who got DFA'd by the Yankees.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
yes, I understand the frustration from Cards fans, but this is a great deal for the Cardinals.
Couldn't agree with you more on that. And even your point, the John King side of it, King is probably their third or fourth best reliever on the roster right now. That even in itself is nice value for next year. But then Saggese, whether he's a trade chip or he's the next Brendan Donovan type to come up, and then Tekoa Roby could be I've seen from, this isn't just Cardinals analysis, but I've seen the Kyle Reeses of the world and other be oh, he's easily their best prospect now. This is the guy. And then you look at nationally, there's people saying okay, this Roby guy, if he was healthy, there's no way the Rangers would have traded him. The fact that they took and that's encouraging too. They took a risk on a guy who had an arm injury. They bought on a guy that was raking at AA, and he's won the AA MVP as well in Saggese. The Cardinals can sign Montgomery this offseason. Like, what do we want to do? Like, re-sign him and not have Takeo Roby and Thomas Gacy? Like, he's not going to turn down. Like, Jordan Montgomery's going to sign with the team that offers him the most money. Maybe
That
there's
works.
something that sways him with geographical stuff, but I don't think him staying an extra 2 months in St. Louis would have changed that. And then signing him back in the spring, like, I know he talked about he wanted a deal, but he's a Scott Boras client. Like, it
Exactly.
wasn't it
Exactly.
wasn't going to be the $16 million a year that Michaelis was getting. It was probably 25 to 26. And whatever that deal was then, everyone would have freaked out because he was not this, like, after seeing this season, everyone's like, yeah, he's worth that money. And even then, I don't know if a Cardinals fan thinks he's worth $26 million a year, even though that's what he's going to get. I just, yeah, perfect. Like, I get accused of being a holding Mo's water all the time. I feel like I'd say call it as it is when I see it, but that was just an incredible deal. So I think we could debate whether or not they should have re-signed Michaelis. Looking back, they should have just signed neither of them, but it's fine. We'll work at it.
Yeah, I just again like could not agree more with the extension sentiment here. Like an extension maybe was possible, but I can't actually think of a Scott Boras client I've seen get extended, and it's never team friendly. If
Nope.
Scott Boras signs a deal, it is the exact maximum amount that his client can get. That's what he does. That's
Yep.
what he promises as an agent. That's why people have him as their agent,
Yep.
right? He does not settle before free agency because he knows players play well in contract years oftentimes. He wants to capitalize on that value, and Monty's been great. But again, you're so right. There's no way that they were going to settle for anything besides a massive overpay. And like
Yep.
maybe that'd be a little bit cheaper than it is now, probably a little cheaper. But I totally understand why the Cardinals weren't going to take that risk. Also, at the time, the season Michaelis was coming off of last year was really good. There was a lot to suggest that Miles Michaelis was a really great pitcher. He had incredible control, threw 200 innings for the third time in 5 years. That's a huge deal. Other guys aren't giving you, and it's not just 200 innings, it's 200 quality innings. 200 quality innings with an ERA right around 3.4, 3.5. Like
Yeah.
that is number two, number three stuff. I understand signing him, and it was below market value. Had Michaelis done that again and hit free agency, he'd be looking at a deal around 20 million AAV probably.
Yep. He'd be looking at
So
like Sonny Gray money right now. Like, not at quite as much, but in that range.
yeah,
So, and also they did, again, another smart move. They front loaded the deal a little bit. They added money onto his salary in 2023. So instead of paying him what should have been a 19 to 20 AAV, they're paying him $16 million a year next year. I think, I mean, again, if he pitches like he did this year, it's an overpay. But if he
sure.
gets even slightly back, if he's last year, that's a great value. And if he's
Yeah,
anywhere in
Mark.
between $16 million a year for a guy who eats 200 innings with a mid 3 ERA, even a 4 ERA, that's it works. And you need a guy who can eat innings. So if we're talking about like big picture playoff thoughts, one of the things that stuck out to me is all the teams that got swept out of the wild card, they couldn't hit. The
Yeah.
Milwaukee Brewers, I mean, we all knew, we've watched them for years. They don't have an offense. The Tampa Bay Rays, their offense just continues to not come up in the postseason. Last year, they got shut out of the games. This year, they almost set a record for most postseason innings in a row without scoring a run. You
From in their
had,
fans.
yeah, and in front of the 10 fans that show up to their games, they're
So
going to build
embarrassing.
the ballpark in the exact same spot. Like, that's going to make a difference. But why am I
Yeah.
blanking on the other teams that got swept out here?
Well, the Marlins.
The Marlins, which again, we all know don't have an offense.
Yeah.
And then I just had, and the Blue Jays, which
Yeah.
is supposed to be a good offense, but sometimes good offenses in a 2 game sample size don't perform. I wonder if that's ever happened to a team before. Oh yeah, the Cardinals. Sometimes you can have a good offense and things don't happen. But I think the moral of the story here is like, you need the pitching. Obviously, you need the front 2 guys, but then you have guys that can capitalize off that kind of pitching in the playoffs. I saw a lot of discourse on social media, especially on X, Twitter,
Oh yeah.
talking about how the Cardinals offense was not good enough this year, that are ranked in the mid, like
So
the
funny.
13, 14, 15 range in offense. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
It's
So
hilarious.
yeah, I did some digging. So you had over 1,000 plate appearances, almost 1,100, or a little over 1,100, I think, which is almost 2 full season or
Yes.
of position players. So think of this, like two full-time position players at bats, from Alukin Baker, from Taylor Motter, from the like all the guys you can think of that came up in September that shouldn't be getting plate appearances. You had over 1,100 at bats from those guys. So that
It's like
brings your
having a pitcher spot in your lineup again. Basically, the Cardinals had a pitcher spot. They had two of them pretty much this year.
exactly. Their lineup in September looked like the 2017, 2016 or 2017, 2018 Cardinals where their offense was just awful. Like
Yeah.
it looked like that again. So you do that. So I'm like, okay, I test second half lineup wasn't going to be good. We all knew that. And then you look at their end of the season rankings. Yeah, it isn't good. So I went back and I'm like, okay, Brendan Donovan goes down on 7/28. They officially shut him down for the year. They sell right after that. Here is their offensive rankings at the time. They were sixth in all of baseball in WRC plus with 109. They were seventh in slug, seventh in on base percentage, seventh in WOBA, eighth in average, eighth in WAR. Like they were a really good offense while having a down year from Goldie, a down year from Arenado, injuries to Nootbaar in the first half, injuries to Gorman. Like there were guys,
Yeah.
Contreras having that weird thing happen, and then he caught fire then. Like the offense was really good. And then you look at so they're 10% above league average as a team. Before that moment, you look at September, I think they were 15% below league average in September. So that like totally
Makes a lot
dips
of
your
sense.
offense. So am I concerned in some ways? Sure. Like I don't think people are talking enough about Arenado's back injury. Like hopefully he's healthy in the spring and it's not a big deal, but he was 7% above league average, I believe, at the plate this year. Like that's
Yeah.
horrible for the expectations that we have for him.
Yes.
Like so if assuming we all think he's going to be back to normal, that's potentially 20 to 30% of a boost from his position
Yes.
alone. Goldie caught fire at the end. Contreras looks comfortable now. It's a year of development for Walker, Gorman, Nootbaar,
Yeah.
Donovan. The offense is the least of their concerns. They don't need to
Absolutely.
add anyone. Do they need to be better at positioning guys and figuring out how to maximize their talent? Do they maybe need to cut from the glut a little bit? I'm all in on all of that. But to say that they need a new center fielder, to say they need a new DH, like okay, like what are we doing here? What are your thoughts, Sandy?
I'm
I'm ranting
I'm
too
totally
much.
with you. No, I'm totally with you because you can't judge, like you can't evaluate a team when the team just wasn't there. Down the
Yep.
stretch in September, we saw a team that was playing Juniel Caracuto. We saw a team that was playing Jose Fermin, Richie Palacios, who actually I really like Richie Palacios.
Yeah.
Like I really like him and I love to see him training up at Driveline. Shout out to Richie. That's awesome. Like I think he actually might be really good at some point in
Yeah.
time. But like I'm sorry, 24-year-old Richie Palacios does not need to be a starter on the Cardinals for 3 months,
Yeah.
right? And it felt like that's kind of what we got because nobody was playing, nobody was
Yeah.
healthy.
Or you even got Mason Wynn, which I mean, we all wanted to see him, but we all knew it was going to take time for his bat to come up.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Mason Wynn moved really quickly for sort of those glove first speed prospects. Like those guys generally move a little slower, I think, because no one's itching to see their bat at the big league level. And so he's really young. I don't
yep.
have a problem with him. But yeah, his bat was horrible, right? But like that's kind of what was expected. You're so right. But again, like I don't know, not having Donovan, not having Gorman, Contreras, like not getting as much playing time in the first half as he should have, and then being hurt again at the end. Like all of that put together for the Cardinals to still probably be a top 3, top 4 offense in the National League, that's a huge deal. You're talking about them basically being better than everybody except for the Braves and the Dodgers.
Yep.
Like that's a big deal. That's a really good offense. That offense, just considering like National League playoff teams, that offense was far better than the Brewers. It was far better than the Marlins. It was far better than the Diamondbacks. It was better than the Phillies, kind of a lot better than the Phillies, actually, when you think about all the holes that they had in their lineup. So, like you said, the offense, not the issue at all. There are very few teams in contention in the National League this year that stacked up with the Cardinals positionally.
Yep. Yeah, and I think I mean, obviously the Philly, actually, they're a great example. The Phillies got off to a really slow start to the year. Well, Bryce Harper was out. Like Trey Turner was hitting really slow as a hitter, all that kind of stuff. And no one back then was like their offense is terrible. Get rid of their team. Like once their bats were on and once they were healthy, they were fine. And so I
Yeah.
think the Phillies are a really good comparison of like what kind of tier we're looking at. Like the Braves, I don't think there's anything the Cardinals or anyone in the National League besides the Dodgers can do to catch the Braves right now. Like
Absolutely not.
your best case scenario is you have a fighting chance like the Phillies do right now of knock or a puncher's chance of knocking them out. So that's what you're
Yeah.
trying to position yourself to do. And that's possible in the playoffs if you have the top end talent to do it. They have it offensively. They don't have it pitching wise right now. That's the story of the moment. And I think like well, first of all, if they're even contending for a wild card spot and they miss the playoffs, I guarantee you they finish top 10 easily in all these offensive categories because they probably don't shut down Gorman like they did.
Yes.
Arenado probably muscles through it a little bit more. Like there's some different things that happen there. So,
Well, it's
anyways,
more
oh yeah,
it's so hard to like hit well when you're down 8-0 in the
yep,
first, right? Like I think if the Cardinals are more competitive in a lot of these games, they're probably hitting better. Like, I don't know. I think the slog definitely takes a toll on guys in August and September, those dog day months.
yeah.
If you're down, if you've lost 80 your last 10 and you're getting absolutely pummeled again on some like random Tuesday evening at Busch Stadium, like, I'm sorry, I wouldn't be in it either.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think people will say that's making excuses. I think you'd be making excuses if you're saying the whole reason the offense is terrible this past year is because of that. Like there's a lot of reasons for
Yeah,
things. And if it comes back in May next year, they're not hitting, none of us are going to sit here and say, well, like just give it a little like then there maybe is some issues. And same with like an Ollie Marmol. Like, I mean, you can depend how you feel, change how you feel about him, whatever you want to do, but I'm going to defend him now because I think there's so many things that are issues this
yeah,
past year. But if we get more evidence that says it's wrong, then it's wrong. So I just don't see a scenario. And then you also have to JC coming up. You have Victor Scott. Like you've got
yeah,
plenty of bats internally. I could maybe see them going after a backup infielder if they trade
sure.
one of their guys, maybe another outfielder, but not a starter. Like I just that's a waste of resources.
I
Pitching,
agree.
pitching, pitching. It's
Yep.
all they need. And speaking of pitching, the Cardinals are actually linked to a lot of guys right now, which is
Good.
really good news. And to take a step back for a second, I'll rant, or maybe not rant, but I will kind of set the floor. Is that in past off seasons, Cardinals fans, even Cardinals media, will sometimes link them to people that they are not actually interested in. So to say like they missed out on Trey Turner is not true. They didn't go after Trey Turner. To say they missed out on Bryce Harper in the past, that was an oversight on their part, but they were not interested in Bryce Harper. They didn't
They
say
were.
they didn't go up to the number. Same with Max Scherzer. That story kind of floated up again the other day. Like they could have had him. They chose not to. This time around, they are choosing to be in the markets for Blake Snell, Aaron Nola, Sonny Gray. We'll go through a lot of these names later. They are linking themselves to these guys. When that happens, they tend to actually make really good offers
Yeah.
and get the guy or get outbid in a crazy way. Example, David Price. They had him pen in hand, ready to sign a deal, and then the Red Sox went and offered him $50 million more, and the Cardinals were like, "That's insane. Get out of here." I think we all think that was a good call. They had Giancarlo Stanton acquired. He
And
said no.
he toed the trade.
Yeah, you had last offseason, Sean Murphy was their guy. They went to the wire to get him. The Athletics asked for the most insane offers. So they
Mhm.
pivoted to who? Wilson Contreras, who was the best catcher available. I'm not here to say the Cardinals just make all the big moves all the time. They they philosophically chose to not invest in the top end of the pitching market. Ownership did not want that to happen. It's unclear how much the front office actually didn't want to do that, but clearly they were not allowed to. Derrick Goold is coming out and saying that has changed. Adam Wainwright's come out and said ownership's hungry. Derrick Goold is saying internally they've had conversations. They see eye to eye that they need to invest in pitching. At the end of the day, it depends on if they actually go get that pitching. If they get one of the arms and they don't get two, we'll be here to critique them. If they
Absolutely.
try to sell us that Jordan Montgomery, James Paxton, and some random guy with a 4-year array is going to solve it, no one's going to agree with that. But right now, it seems like they are ready to make changes. And so, what Sandy and I are going to do is there's a list of guys who have already been linked to them. So these are guys that multiple sources have said within the Cardinals organization that they are actually interested in these names. And we will go through and say, how do we feel like if Josh and Sandy are signing the contracts and making the trades, do we think this is the best fit for the Cardinals or do we not think? Yay or nay? Now, there's probably going to be 5 yays and something nays. Obviously, they aren't going to get all of these guys, but who
Sure.
makes the most sense in terms of trade value, in terms of the dollars to sign them, in terms of what the Cardinal fit, all that kind of stuff. So I'll go through the list of names. We'll debate them a little bit, talk through how we feel about them, and then we can maybe throw in some random names as well that maybe haven't been linked to them yet, but in the reporting again, they keep saying they're not limited to these names. These are just the names that have risen to the surface to start. So let's start with a big one. The probable NL Cy Young Award winner, someone who seems very different than what the Cardinals typically bring in, and that is Padres' Blake Snell. Obviously, he leads all of baseball in ERA right now. He's also a walk machine, but he's also a strikeout machine. He's probably going to get the biggest contract of them all. Sandy, it looked like you gave the thumbs down. Why are you
Yeah.
out on Blake Snell?
I'm really out on Blake Snell. I'm pulling up some
Okay.
of the numbers, but basically my thing with Snell, he's had 2 good seasons ever, and he's been in the league now for 8 years.
Yep.
In his first good season, go back to 2018, he won the Cy Young Award. That's awesome. Before that, he was 4% above average as a pitcher. After that, 3% above average as a pitcher. That year, randomly, 217 ERA plus, right? 117% above league average. That's incredible. But after that, never even touched 130 again until this year, when randomly again, he leads all of baseball in ERA plus.
Yep.
Maybe if you sign Blake Snell to a 6-year deal, you get like 1, maybe 2 of these incredible years. But I don't want that. I want a guy who's going to be consistent for me every year.
Yep.
Miles Mikolas has been better than Blake Snell in 5 of his 8 seasons. That's that's pretty damning evidence for a guy who we're talking about getting a bazillion dollars because he had 1 great year in a contract year. I'm telling you right now, change up the sequencing here. If Blake Snell had done, this year what he did in 2021, for example, when he threw 128 innings with an ERA of 4.20, a FIP around 3.8, ERA plus of 92, we'd be talking about him getting considerably less money. Oh, and by the way, he walked less guys and struck out more guys that year.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because you even go like sometimes I try to pull up what were people's feelings on free agents at the beginning of the year versus the end of the year. And Blake Snell was like kind of one of those guys that people thought maybe he'd have to take a 1-year deal to figure things out, or he'd get like maybe a I don't know, like a Chris Bassett type deal. Like he wasn't going to get big money, and everyone's concerns was he walks the world, he's inconsistent, he doesn't go deep in the games. Obviously, he's had a historic second half, and so I'm a nay on Blake Snell, but I'm not like totally out on him where I'm like I would hate it if the Cardinals signed him. If they decide to sign him, I would hope it's because they see something in him. Obviously his top end talent's there, so like could he continue it? Like sure, maybe he's figured himself out as a pitcher now, and but I think there are just so many red flags where if he was in the Sonny Gray type of like contract range, you would sign that in
Oh,
a
yeah.
heartbeat because
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
the risk is just it's worth it. But when you're signing him to a top of the market deal, he's I mean, besides maybe Yamamoto, which even then I think he probably gets less than Snell. Snell's going to get the most money. I get scared of guys that are so reliant on their stuff. Like you think that's a good thing, but when you walk the world, which he hasn't, I think he leads the league in
99 walks this year,
yeah. So he
all of
up
baseball.
leads all baseball, but then I think he also leads the league in least amount of hits per 9, which that's great.
Wild.
But the second he starts giving up more hits and the second those strikeouts drop off, sure, he might reinvent himself as a pitcher, but we haven't seen that yet. It's probably going to be doom and gloom for him. It's you're maybe potentially paying this guy $30 million a year, and he's not going deep into games. He's not striking guys out anymore. I think there's a lot of reasons to be cautious there. So I'm encouraged the Cardinals are in on him because it means they're willing to look at different pitching than they have before. But ultimately, I'm probably out on Blake Snell too. So let's go to the one of the other biggest names,
Wait,
unless you have
can I
anything else
just
to
hit
add to
one
that.
more thing about
Yeah,
Blake?
go for that.
So I just wanted to say I've been looking at this data here, and like last year, Blake Snell, 3.38 ERA, 2.8 FIP, walked 3.6, which is actually doable, struck out 12 per 9. Okay. That was a really good pitcher. This year, Blake Snell, his ERA drops an entire point, actually more than a point, and his FIP has gone up 0.6.
Yikes.
He's gotten incredibly lucky in an environment, okay, because he leads the league in hits per 9, like you said, but still has a below average whip, meaning he's putting a ton of runners on base. And this is an environment where we just got the shift banned. So like hits are more common than ever. We saw that the whole Cardinals staff started giving up more hits this year, despite having a very good defense still. I just don't see how there's any way that Blake Snell should be a target for the Cardinals. I actually would say if the Cardinals went out and signed Blake Snell to a top of the market deal, day one, I would consider it a failure. I'd be happy to be wrong, but I would consider that a failure from day one.
That's fair. And maybe like, and if I'm sitting back and they make that deal, I probably am pessimistic that it works out. I think I'm mostly actually this is probably the wrong way to look at it, because I'd rather them make the right moves than the one that appeals fans. But for me, it would be like, okay, they did what everyone asked them to do. If it fails, like, look why they didn't do it in the past. Now, that's I'm not totally defending that, but I'm saying, like, in a Blake Snell standpoint, like, I think it makes sense to hold off. But like you said, you could prove us wrong. So let's go to another name that's been linked to him a lot. Also has concerns, but for different reasons than Blake Snell, Aaron Nola. Again, he just feels like a Cardinal. He eats innings. I think a good comparison I've heard is he's Miles Michaelis plus, where it's like he's that kind of pitcher, but just better, which actually isn't always true. If you compare their 3 years, the past 3 years, Miles Michaelis and Aaron Nola, they're really comparable. Like, you honestly might pick Miles Michaelis. But in general, over his career, Aaron Nola is one of the top pitchers in baseball. He's at a 5.5 WAR win season. He was 6.3 WAR last year, 4.4 and 4.5 also. But he's also a little inconsistent. This year, he has a 4.46 ERA. He's had a 4.63 ERA before, 4.78. He's been below 3 ERA once in his career, above 4 3 times. So there's some issues there, but he also eats a lot of innings. And he's a guy that I think will age well, where he's not so reliant on his stuff to dominate you, like in a strikeout swing and miss sense, that his strikeouts have dipped a little bit the last year. It was above 10 for the last few years, and now it's per 9. Now it's 9 point something, I think, or maybe it's 8 point something.
9.4 this year.
Oh, 9.4. Okay, so it's still a batter per 9 innings, which is some of the Cardinals don't really have right now, so that's kind of nice. I would still say I think it's more of a, I would say it's a yay for me, because the pros of what he could provide this staff from an innings standpoint is worth it. And I do think he will not, I don't think he'll be this bad. I think you're probably looking at a mid 3-year raise kind of guy. And if he's giving you over 200 innings, that's really good value. And then he's proven in the postseason he can step up when it matters the most. So he kind of feels like a guy who knows what it means to pitch in the regular season versus what it means to pitch in the postseason. And when he's on the biggest stage, NLCS and World Series last year did not go well. That's true. But then you look at the wild card this year, wild card last year, and NLDS last year, he covered 19 2/3 innings without giving up a run in those 3 starts. Like, that's really good pitching. So I'm in on Aaron Nola. I have my concerns though. So I'm not like, he's not my favorite target on the market. There's multiple guys I'd rather have than Aaron Nola. But if they went after him, I think that's good for one of the arms. What do you think, Sandy?
Yeah, I absolutely feel a lot like that. I like Aaron Nola more than I like Snell, because I think he's a lot cheaper than Snell, right? Like,
yeah.
I also think the things that we're saying, executives are probably saying too,
True.
Right? Like, MLB execs are super smart and they have access to data that we don't even have. And yeah, you're probably not, I don't think, especially in this league that's so much more data driven than it was 5 years ago, and much more than it was 8 years ago when we're talking about David Price being a free agent. I don't think you're going to have, an office that's just gonna be like, oh my gosh, we need Aaron Nola and his below average strikeout stuff to be our ace. We're going to pay him $200 million. Like, that's just not going to happen. These execs are smart. I think they're having conversations that we are, and it's going to lower his value a little bit. And I think that does bring him into the Cardinals range. And I would be okay with them signing him. It's going to be cheaper than Snell. So yeah, I really like that. And also, like, looking at his numbers right now, like you said, he a little bit inconsistent. 2 of the last 3 years, he's been a below average pitcher. But before that, he had, 4 consecutive, very, very good seasons all in a row, almost won a Cy Young one year. But you're right. It's not the same, like, peaks and valleys that you see with Snell. And he throws a ton more innings than Snell does. He approached 200 this year, was over 200 last year. He doesn't walk like anybody. He pounds the strike zone. I really like that. I think, like, if you're the Cardinals, again, even in this new league, you do want to trust your defense. You have those guys for a reason. Arenado is going to be better defensively than he was last year. I just have to manifest that, because there's no way he's that bad again. You have to be assuming that that's going to improve. So yeah, I'd be fine with a guy who's going to trust his defense. He's not going to put people on base for no reason. Free passes have really hurt the Cardinals last year, especially.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say like medium thumbs up for me for Aaron Nola. If he
Yay-ish.
did it, I'd be happy to watch him pitch on opening day.
Yeah, I think so too. And also, I think with pretty much all these names, it goes without saying, we're not saying the Cardinals need to go and get just one guy. So
Yes.
if they went out and got just Aaron Nola, if they went out and just got name your favorite starter, but not another top end guy, that's a failure. So when we say yay or nay to some guys, like it's with the assumption that it's paired with other things. Aaron Nola doesn't save the staff, but Aaron Nola plus other things could. Let's go to the next guy. That's probably I think most people would say there's three guys in the top of the market. You've got Aaron Nola, Blake Snell, and then you've got Yoshinobu, I believe it is
Yeah.
Yamamoto. We all
Yoshinobu
know it.
Yamamoto. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, Sandy, your initial thoughts. I've got some interesting thought, or
Yeah.
I've actually flipped on my opinion on this because I won't. Here, I'll let you go. Let's roll.
Well, I mean, being friends with Andrew, right? He's kind of he knows a lot more about the Japanese leagues than I do. So I generally trust him. And he was telling me like they're kind of going through a dead ball era right now, so it's
Yeah,
really hard to tell like what's good over there and what's not. I'm trying
which
to
is
pull
super
up.
under talked about. I don't hear anyone else
Yes.
talking about that. So good on Andrew for that.
Yeah, he's really plugged in. And so, I mean, he's telling me Yamamoto is like compared to the league is the best Japanese pitcher to ever come to the States, which to me, like, that's crazy because we
Yeah,
just saw Shohei Ohtani come to the States and be awesome,
Kodai
which is really
Senga.
exciting. And Kodai Senga, who just came over last year, similar run environment, was very good this year. You're talking about a
Yeah,
guy who might be better than him. That's awesome. Like, I'd definitely be willing to pay handsomely for that. But at the same time, I just always have questions about guys coming over from a different league because sometimes it just doesn't work at all.
yeah,
I mean, like it took Kikuchi like 6 years to become
mm,
adjusted to Major League Baseball hitting. And now we finally see him being a productive pitcher. It's like, oh, this is the talent he had from the beginning, probably, but it took him a long time to get there.
yeah,
You know, even like farther back in the day, Uehara comes over and like just complete disappointment.
yeah,
And like that's so I don't know. I really don't want to see the Cardinals play at the top of the market for a guy with that like one massive question mark. So for me, like I'd be really excited if they got him. So probably like here, I'd like it a little more
okay,
than Nola, but I'm not. It's not like Gray, where Gray for me is like, oh my gosh, I'm all in.
yeah. That's fair. And I would say I'm mostly so at yes and to a lot of that. I'm a pro Yamamoto now. I was out because I thought his market was going to get out of hand in a sense that
Yeah.
I just don't love the idea of giving money to someone that I just don't understand. Like if it's going to translate or not, like even beyond just the play on the field, like what if there's like a cultural coming, like there's been guys in the past who just don't really like the American lifestyle and miss home. I mean, if you're in St. Louis, especially, you're not anywhere close to Japan. And so that's not like an easy flight. Let's go home and hang out for the weekend type thing. Not
Mm.
that LA is either, but I think it'd be a culture shock. But I'm gonna get out of that because that's just too much speculative there. Some things that concern me before is he only struck out 9.3 batters per nine in another league. It makes me think like how much is he gonna strike out the major league level? But end of the day, this dude has a 1.16 ERA
Yeah.
and he's 25. Like that's incredible. And something that I think is really so I was listening to Derrick Goold talk to Zach, or Kevin Wheeler the other day on his Best Podcast in Baseball, and they're talking about Yamamoto. And the Cardinals are actually uniquely positioned this offseason to go after the Japanese market, not just in a way that they've had success there before, but they've actually began to invest a lot of money into their infrastructure over there and to begin to have the personnel to go out there and scout and build relationships with those organizations. So he didn't name the scout, but they hired a scout last year who is extremely plugged in Japan. So it's his first year with the Cardinals, but he's been over there and worked for a half dozen to a dozen organizations in the majors, one of the best out there. And he actually has a really good relationship with Yamamoto's team right now, which means a
Okay.
lot. He's a guy that's plugged in there. He knows how to, and he has a history of. So I'm surprised he didn't name him because he was giving a lot of info. But he has a history of actually closing deals on those guys. So he scouts them, he brings them to the team, and then he helps build a relationship where they actually want to come sign from Japan. Now, that probably actually has more to help to do with some of the other Japanese names that are lower on the list. Like ultimately Yamamoto's market, like he's probably going to go highest bidder. It's probably not going to matter as much the relationships on him. I'm kind of in on Yamamoto because of the fact that he's 25. You're looking for a guy who, I mean, even if he regresses, like he regresses like by two, like gives up two more runs per 9 innings, that's a 3.16 ERA. Like he's
Good.
got a lot of room to like fail based on how he's pitched in Japan. And I just think like all of the starters have concerns.
Yeah,
So assuming he goes for less than Blake Snell, but more than Aaron Nola, if you compared Aaron Nola and Yamamoto to me, I think he's got more pros than than Nola in my opinion. And the age is really nice there too. I think just the fact that every pitcher has question marks makes me think like,
absolutely.
okay, if his biggest question mark is can he be like he's historically good in Japan, can he be good in the United States? I would feel like that's probably a yes. So that's where I'd probably lean on that. Where like Nola, Snell, pretty much all these other guys, if they had a mid 4 ERA last year, you probably wouldn't be shocked by it either. Now, would I be shocked by Yamamoto? Probably not. But like again, there's just the level of performance he's putting on right now at the age he's doing and how he's doing it matters. So I'm in on Yamamoto. Would be a big yes, but I just end of the day, it's gonna be hard to outbid the Mets and the Yankees and the
Yeah.
Dodgers. So we'll see. Um, Now I know that we're both a big fan of this next one. I
Yes.
count him
Yeah,
as a tier 1 pitcher. I know most
absolutely.
people don't, so I will put him in tier 2 in this argument, but he is a tier 1 starter to me. Sonny Gray. I could go on for days, but Sandy, you can lead us off with the home
Yeah.
run move.
There is actually not a con to Sonny Gray, in my opinion.
Okay.
There's zero cons. There's nothing wrong with signing Sonny Gray. There's no way to spin it to make it
Yeah.
wrong. The only way it could possibly be wrong is if the Cardinals, like me, were too much in love with him and decided he was the only person that needed to pitch, and they started him every single day because he is the answer. And it's just like you look at what he's done over the course of his career. He has a 121 ERA plus. He has basically been a below average pitcher twice in his entire career. Twice in
Yep.
11 years, he's been below average. And he's not just like above average. He generally hangs out above 120. How many years in a row do you think he's been above 120, Josh, in terms of ERA plus?
3?
One, two, three, four, five, six, seven,
Wait,
eight.
above 120?
8 times in 11 years. He's been 20% above league average
Oh,
or
I think
more.
you said in a row. Okay, it's still
Oh,
8 times in
oh,
11 years is insane. Either way.
in a row,
Okay.
he's done it. He did it 3 times in a row to start his career. Then
Okay.
he did it 4 out of the last 5 seasons, taking a break in
Jeez.
2021 to post an oh my goodness 112 ERA plus season that's still really good. He
Yeah.
routinely throws a lot of innings, right? 184 this year. He's topped 200 before twice in a row in his career back with Oakland. He had a slight hiccup with the Yankees. He was available the entire pandemic season and was actually really good because that's what Sonny Gray does. He's really good. He is effective. He's consistent. That's exactly what the Cardinals need. He doesn't walk people. He doesn't just put people on base for no reason. Also, he like never gives up home runs. He's
Yeah.
only allowed more than one homer per 9 once in the last 6 seasons. Like these are all things to me that are just like slam dunk player. Oh, and by the way, he's cheaper than all those other guys, which doesn't make any sense to me because like if it was all up to me and I got to like set the Sonny Gray market, if I was him, I'd be looking for like $28 million a year AAV. Like he
Yeah.
deserves that money.
Yeah, especially when you look at like Scherzer and Verlander got in the 40s. Like
Yeah.
I think if you're looking at a short-term deal, if you're a pitcher that's near the top of the league in ERA and is consistently, I can't find the stat, but I had it the other day, is he's at least top 15 in career ERA among all starters that are
Yeah.
active right now.
Mhm.
I think he's 13th. Is I just didn't want to say the exact number and be wrong on that. But he's in like massively underrated throughout his career. And the places he's pitched in New York, which is probably the highest pressure situation in all baseball.
Yep.
Now it didn't go well, but he's been on record talking about how he changed some stuff and also personality fit just didn't work very well. New York, St. Louis is not New York. It is pressure, but it's not New York. He pitched in Oakland, which they were good back in those days, but again, it's Oakland and it's just a weird environment. He was a Cy Young candidate pitching in Great American Ballpark in the NL
Yeah.
Central.
Should have
Like
won it.
Yeah,
Should have.
that's insane. So like there's a lot of the pros right there too. And so like if he was a guy looking for a 2-year deal, getting at least 30 million a year makes sense to me. Um, but again, he's not his market doesn't seem to be like that right now, which is I think great news for the Cardinals. A
Yeah,
couple of like random tidbits about him too that seems like a good fit for St. Louis is he doesn't want to play a long time, so he's not going to be looking for a 5-6 year deal. He's probably one more contract and done. So I would say at max, he's looking for a 4-year deal, but you're probably looking into, I'd say 3 years is probably it, but maybe
yeah.
it's 2 years. And then he really wants to get closer to home. He was really open about that the All-Star game, and he's in Minnesota from Nashville. This is not like it's not nothing, but it's not like he's in LA trying to get to Nashville. So for him to want to get even closer means he's going to shrink his options down, probably. But he was very adamant that he's a family man, wants to be home. Look, the two closest geographical cities are Cincinnati and Atlanta, which does scare me a little bit because I could see either of those teams wanting to go after him. But then it's St. Louis. And so Derrick Goold has already talked about how he or the Cardinals are going to approach Aaron Nola and Sonny Gray right out of free agency because and see if they have mutual interest because they think they should. They're like, we see each other as good fits. And then Sonny Gray specifically, he's already talked about they're going to try and move on him quickly and see a lot of reasons why that move makes a ton of sense. And so it already seems like it's going to happen. It's not just us being like, that makes a lot of sense. The Cardinals think it makes a lot of sense. Sonny Gray is a great starter. I would be comfortable with him. I'm not saying this is ideal, but I'd be comfortable with him as your opening day starter in
I'd be,
2024.
I'd be so.
Um, I would be too. And honestly, if you have Aaron Nola and Sonny Gray, or you have Yamamoto and Sonny Gray, I think Sonny Gray can start game one. Like that's the kind of pitcher he is right
Yeah,
now.
can. Sonny
Um,
Gray, it's like he's the perfect small market starter.
yeah,
Like look at what
exactly.
he does in Oakland and Cincinnati and Minnesota. Those are like mid or small market teams, and Sonny Gray shows up and does his job. I've never heard anyone complain about him. Like he seems like a great teammate, a great fit, very much like a Cardinal way guy. Those are
Yeah.
all things that like should be important. You talk
Yep.
about someone like wanting to go closer to the middle of the country so that they can spend more time with their family. That sounds a lot like a lot of reasons Cardinals players have gone where they are. One more thing about Sonny Gray. There are
Yeah.
just players for whatever reason throughout their career that are just routinely underrated. I don't
Yep.
understand why. It's a narrative that develops around a player when they're young, early on in their career. And then there are other players that for some reason, like everyone just assumes that they're incredible. Jeremy Pena has been this way. Like, I don't think Jeremy Pena is a great ball player.
Hmm.
People continually talk about him as if he's an all-star caliber player. Sonny Gray, though, like just never has gotten any buzz no matter what he's done. He now has a career WAR of 30, which is like elite when you look at careers when it's all said and done. Most guys don't even top 10. Adam Wainwright, actually, in terms of B WAR, 44.9 is where he'll rest for the rest of his career.
Wow.
Sonny Gray, at only 33, has a great chance of passing that. We're
That's
talking about a
incredible.
guy who probably, according to WAR at least, will have more value than Adam Wainwright over the course of his career. That's a
Wow.
great pitcher, not just for 1 year. That's a great pitcher for a bunch of years. Super impressive to me. Also, last thing, Blake Snell's career WAR, 21. And Blake Snell is 30. So he would have to have basically 3 really good seasons, which he hasn't done yet. He's only had 2 really good seasons ever
Yeah.
to even get into the same range as Sonny Gray. So,
Dang. I think you look at a couple other guys. So the guys who passed them or who have passed Sonny Gray in career WAR who are currently active, it's Steven Strasburg, Lance
yeah,
Lynn, Yu Darvish, Nola, Bumgardner, Kluber, Cueto, Wainwright, Cole, DeGrom, Sale. Like it's guys, Cole Hamill. Oh, he's not active anymore. Why is he listed as active?
really
Zach
good list.
Greinke, Scherzer, Kershaw, Verlander. Like it's Hall of Famers and
Really
or
good
borderline Hall
list.
of Famers. So I totally agree. He's underrated. At this point, I'm getting like I think people are starting to buy into the idea of him being in the Cardinals rotation. It seems like people have also realized he's not a number 3 starter, which
Thank goodness.
I mean, I would love if the Cardinals made him as their
Yeah.
3 starter. That
Yeah.
means they have the best staff in baseball. So, like, sure. But if you think his talent is that, that's ridiculous. I just, yep, too many green flags with Sonny Gray. If that's the only move the Cardinals make, it's a failure of an offseason, but it's not a failure of a move. Sonny Gray's
Great.
the guy. I love it. And again, the value's there. Also, I mean, I think he just produced on the biggest stage Twins have not won a playoff series since, what was it, 2004?
Hadn't won
Like,
a playoff game since
yeah,
2002. 18 losses in a row in the playoffs.
insane. So they, in the game, the clinching game, he gives up, or he goes 5 innings scoreless. And again, he only threw 80 high 80s pitches. He probably could have gone another inning, but manager's discretion. They pulled him. He made that clutch pickoff play. He talked about it at length in a press conference. Like, he is a gamer. So give me Sonny Gray. I'm all in. And also, like, with a lot of these guys in general, like, if the Cardinals really go after them, even if they're not Cy Young candidates, the fact that you go from literal uncertainty outside of Jordan Montgomery every start from what you're going to get, and your bullpen's trashed because you're constantly having to go to them early in games. Yeah. Now you have consistency, you have stoppers. Like, even when the Cardinals, like, this isn't the first year the Cardinals rotation's been a mess. Last year they had to patch at the deadline. The year before that, remember, they had to go after John Lester, Wade LeBlanc, and all of them. Like, they've done really weird things. J.A. Happ, like, but they always had a stopper. They had Adam Wainwright. They had Jack Flaherty. They had a guy that every fifth day could reset the rotation, reset the bullpen. Jordan Montgomery did that for a stretch, but for the most part, it was a mess for 4 or 5 of the starts of the week. And you even just have 2 really good starters. That transforms the rotation, and also takes pressure off of Myers Michaelis. It takes pressure off of Steven Matz. It takes pressure off of Zach Thompson, etc. So, anyways, the greenest of flags for Sonny Gray.
Absolutely.
Let's go to one more a free agent that's been linked to them, and we'll go to the trade market and then see if there's any guys that we want to throw into the mix. But Jordan Montgomery, again, we talked about him as a guy that we're glad they traded because they got great value out of him. Would you bring it back?
I mean, yeah, I if they brought back Jordan Montgomery and paired that with Sonny Gray, and then obviously you need a big trade if that's the case. But like, yeah, thumbs up. I really like Jordan Montgomery. Like, who doesn't like Jordan Montgomery after what he's done for the Cardinals? He was awesome here. He seemed like a great fit. Never heard any complaints about him in the clubhouse. Seemed like guys really liked him. And we've already seen that. Like, that fit's already happened. So it's not something where we have to be like, oh, are we going to introduce something unknown to a system? Nope. It's already been done. People really liked him. It was great. And by the way, if you bring back Jordan Montgomery, that's great, because then the Rangers, like, assuming they don't win the World Series, then it's like, wow, the Rangers just gave us Takeo Roby and Thomas Sajazi for 10 starts of Jordan Montgomery, and they didn't even win the World Series with it. So now I kind of have to root against the Rangers if that's the case. But like, yes, that'd be awesome. And it'd just be, further, in my opinion, cementing Mo's status as a great GM, but I'm on my soapbox.
Yeah. And I think, again, like, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Obviously, our success for a Cardinals fan is winning the World Series. It's not just scraping into the playoffs.
Sure.
If you're front office and ownership, you're looking to keep your job, or you're looking to keep a business running, making the playoffs a lot and having a chance to win is probably a lot more successful than we would believe it to be. When you have a season as bad as the Cardinals did this year, that changes things. And if they change things this year, I think it proves that Mozeliak is actually a good front office manager. He's made mistakes. When you've been in charge of a team for over a decade, you're going to make plenty of mistakes along the way. This is the defining offseason. Does he change his ways? And does ownership let him change? Because if ownership says, this is your budget and we're not moving on it, then he can make great moves within the confined budget. The Rays do it. Other teams do it. But if he's told he can't give Aaron Nola the contract he wants, or Yamamoto, like, who's that on? That's on the DeWitt. So I'm there with you about Mo. I think he's made a lot of mistakes, but that's all. Oh, Jordan Montgomery is the point of this conversation, though. I am in on him as well. I won't beat the horse dead because we already talked about him, but I think the familiarity side of it makes sense too. Like, if you're going to be bringing in a ton of new arms, it might make sense for one of them to be a friendly face. So, but I would like the idea of change too. So we'll see on some of that. So let's go to some of the trade targets here. One that's been linked for quite a while, I feel like, but he wasn't actually shopped by the White Sox until this deadline. Dylan Cease. I have mixed thoughts on him. Sandy, where are you at with Dylan Cease?
Well, before this year, I really, really wanted Dylan Cease, but then this year happened, and this year was not a great year for Dylan, right? Like, he walked the farm, which you don't want to see. I've got his numbers pulled up. 79 walks and 177 innings is good for 4 for 9, which is sustainable. It's better than Snell by a lot, but he also allowed a ton of hits. So his whip was over 1.4. Right around league average in terms of his ERA plus. He had a better FIP though, had a lower FIP than Snell also, which I wanted to point out. I mean, he
Interesting.
strikes out a lot of guys. I just think he's so expensive. And now that the White Sox have waited so long, he's lost a lot of control. We're talking
Yeah.
about a guy that, what, 2 years now is what you're going to get from him?
Yep.
Like, if you could have traded for him last offseason, the price would have been higher, but like a third year, and maybe with Dylan Cease in your rotation, you're better this year. You're probably a lot better this year. But I don't know. I'm starting to have some doubts about him. I really do think the White Sox are going to say, give us Lars Nootbaar. I really think they're going to say, give us Nolan Gorman. They might be asking for 2 from that grab bag that includes Nootbaar, Donovan, Gorman, etc. Probably not interested in that. So for me, like if Dylan Cease became a Cardinal, my reaction when I see Cardinals acquire Dylan Cease would be like, yes, that's really exciting. But then when I'm reading the price, I would kind of start to turn down. So I'd probably
Yeah.
be honestly a thumbs down on Dylan Cease right now.
Yeah, I wish maybe there's a way we can creatively think of it before the end, but I wish there was a way to say like we're out on a guy assuming the price. And if the price is different, we're in, because Dylan Cease is that guy for me where
Yeah.
I just like, if like you said, it's probably going to take at least one of Nolan Gorman, Lars Nootbaar, Brendan Donovan to pull it off, and potentially more. Like not, it will be more than that, but potentially 2 of those guys. I just don't see that for Dylan C, especially only 2 years of control. And again, he's not like, I mean, he's had one incredible year, but then other than that, hasn't been that good. The stuff is there. I would rather prioritize other people in the market. If he had 3 or more years of control and is coming off a year like this, I think you go, okay, like you still get 3 years of control with him. Maybe it is worth giving up all that value. But I think with so many options where you don't have to give up that kind of value, I would rather go in a different direction when it comes to the trade market. If they're assuming they go with a trade, again, though, if Dylan Cease, they want, I don't know, saying any of those 3 guys kind of hurts me, but they wanted Brendan Donovan, honestly, even if they just wanted Mason Wynn or I don't know, like something like that, I think I'm more open to it.
Yeah.
But again, it depends on the final price point. But I just, in my head, there's too many other options out there that will cost less, but probably produce similar results. But who
Yeah.
knows? Maybe we're looking at this next June and he's a Cy Young candidate, and we're like, oh, we missed the boat on that one. But
Yeah.
I'm probably out on Dylan Cease. Another specific name that has been thrown out there as a trade target is Tyler Glasnow. This is a guy that I'm in on. Now, again, trade value makes a difference here. So they're saying Brendan Donovan, Lars Nootbaar, Nolan Gorman for him. I'm out on that. But assuming they can't ask for that because he's got 1 year of control at $25 million a year and is an injury risk, I'm in. You're looking probably at like a Tommy Edman type trade, which makes a lot of sense because they just lost Wander Franco. He has an extra year of control. Like there's some interesting pieces there that I think Tommy Edman makes a lot of sense as a centerpiece, that kind of deal. Maybe they really like Dylan Carlson. Maybe they want to take a risk on Tyler O'Neill, even though he doesn't like playing on turf. Maybe they like Alec Burleson. Maybe Thomas Sajaci. I could see him as a Ray. That makes a lot of sense. I don't want to give him up. And especially for 1 year of Glasnow, I don't see that. But there's a lot of like, I think there's other names that they could use outside of the core 3 to get Glasnow. And then again, this guy has some of the best stuff in baseball. Again, he only has 1 really elite year. Actually, I would say 2, 2019, 1.78 ERA in 12 starts. He was on pace to be a top Cy Young candidate in 2021 with a 2.66 ERA before he went down with an injury. He made a playoff start last year and was really good coming back from injury. And then again, this year, he made 21 starts with a 3.53 ERA. Again, he's ERA plus a 118 last year. He was 287 last year, but again, that was like 8 innings. 152 in 2021, 248 in 2019 during that 14 game stretch. Like top end stuff, Tyler Glasnow dominates. And he's a guy, when he's healthy, he can go deep into a game if he needs to. Derrick Goold also talked about this recently. The Cardinals are looking at the rotation in aggregate and not necessarily the 5 spots. So for them, me too. And if you're confused what we mean by aggregate here, it's like instead of looking at Tyler Glasnow as just one rotation, like Tyler Glasnow, can he give you 32 spots? They look at each rotation spot. And so if Tyler Glasnow is your number 2 or 3 starter, and he's only giving you, say he gives you 24 starts next year, how they would look at it is, do we go after X pitcher and get 32 starts out of him? Or do we go after Glasnow and get 24 starts out of him and 8 starts out of Zach Thompson? Which is more valuable? again, if I'm the Cardinals, I want the top end talent there and trust that if I have to fill in 6, 7 starts because Glasnow hit the IL one time and Zach Thompson's that guy, you can get by with that. What you can't get by with is Miles Michaelis, Stephen Mass, Adam Wainwright, Jack Flaherty, Jordan Montgomery. Can't
Yes.
happen. And when you get to the postseason, the last 2 years, Glasnow's been there. He's been ready for the postseason. So if he's ready for October, he's giving you 20 to 25 starts in the regular season. I think it makes a lot of sense.
I'm pretty much with you. Like, I really like this. I think if the Cardinals can get him and it's cheap, absolutely. And maybe he's healthy all year. Like, you never know. There's a good chance that he'll be healthy, especially if he's been rehabbing properly and everything. Like, I never want to assume a lack of health for somebody. I feel like that's generally in poor taste. So hopefully he would be. But yeah, like, you can probably count on him giving you at least 15 starts, which would be awesome. And like, I'd be really happy to see that. But it does mean the Cardinals need depth again. So this is kind of the same thing as everything else where, like, yeah, Cardinals acquired Tyler Glasnow. Heck yeah, I'm all in. I'm super happy about that. But that does mean they need depth. And if they get Glasnow, it probably means 6 starters, which is fine. The
Yeah.
Cardinals, like, internally, the options are better than they were last year. That's something
Yep.
I haven't seen enough people talk about. The internal options are better. Gordon Graceffo
Yep.
is a year older. Michael McGreevy is actually probably ready for MLB this year. He wasn't before last year.
Yeah.
You're talking about now you've added Roberta, you've added Klopfenstein, you've added Drew Rom. Zach Thompson has been converted back into a starter, and it actually looked good
Yep.
instead of the first 3 years of his career, where as a starter, he was horrendous. He wasn't just bad, he was unplayable. He was
Yep.
horrible as a starter at every level of the minors. But it's working now, so let's roll with it. You've added all this depth. You're not just talking about Dakota Hudson. So yes, like, I'm all in on Glasnow because, again, they have what they need behind him to actually make this work.
Exactly. And I think to your point too there, it'd be different if they're rolling into the regular season next year with Drew Rom as your 5. But if Drew Rom is your backup or option, your second backup option to the rotation, even Zach Thompson, I'm a little bit more comfortable with as your number 5 going into the year.
Yeah.
But like, assuming he's probably the 6th option, that's a lot stronger position to be in rather than calling up Johan Oviedo and openly saying this guy isn't ready, but we have to pitch him right now. Like,
Yeah,
you
that was
have
tough.
the options.
That was
So
really hard to watch.
yeah. So I feel bad for Cardinal starters of the past years who weren't ready, but they've got the depth now. So now they have the depth. They don't need to. Honestly, people were mad that they said we need more innings. It was kind of true. They needed innings, but they also needed top end guys. Now they've got the innings on the back end to fill those 15, 20 starts that their starters will miss. Hopefully not anything more than that, 30 starts, whatever. They can fill that, but they really need to go after top end talent. So 2 trade partners that were mentioned, but not necessarily names. So maybe let's talk about the fits of partners, and we can bring up specific names if we want to as well, because that's fair. Actually, we could do that. Miami Marlins were one that Derrick Goold talked about. Last 2 we'll talk about here. Miami, how do you feel like as a trade fit? Is there specific starters on the staff you're in on?
Yeah.
Kind of out on Miami as an option in general. I think the Sandy Alcantara injury really throws a wrench into this.
Yeah,
I don't really
absolutely.
know what they'll want to give up. And again, price point, we'll see. What do you think, Sandy?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're talking about a Miami team that 2 years ago had all the depth in the world, and 2 years ago they should have traded some of that depth. Now
Yeah.
it's like, wow, who's not hurt and who's not in witness protection? Okay, Trevor Rogers, where is that guy? He's literally gone. Like, is he in witness protection program? Did he just get disappeared overnight? Because I haven't heard about him in a year. Sixto Sanchez reappeared this year, like, which
Yeah.
kind of made me think, like, wow, the FBI didn't invent this guy, but he's gone again. He's hurt again, and his baseball career probably ended with this injury.
Yeah.
I don't see a way. He came out throwing like 85, couple innings for Double-A, looked good, and then got hurt. It's like, guy's probably done.
Yep.
So that electric 2020 will be one of the bigger what ifs of baseball during the pandemic era. And then, like, Max Meyer, super talented player. Haven't seen him. He's hurt. He's been hurt forever. I don't see them trading Yuri Perez, right?
No shot.
Honestly, no, they won't trade him. I don't see them trading Alcantara ever, which I wouldn't trade him either, but he's hurt, and he's hurt for a long time. He's big hurt, which is not good. So they need all the depth in the world, which means they're not going to trade Braxton Garrett or Jesus Luzardo. And those were the names that I thought the Cardinals could really match up with them on. Garrett. So I have a friend here who's a Marlins fan, big Marlins fan. He does not like Braxton Garrett. He says forever, he said Braxton Garrett relies too heavily on his off speed, doesn't have a good enough fastball. Braxton Garrett's a 4 at best. So I've kind of taken his word for that the more I've
Yeah.
watched. But Braxton was pretty good this year. But also, like, I don't think Braxton Garrett fixes our problems. And I don't think they're trading him now. I don't think they're trading anybody because all that depth is going to be used this year. It's all going to be used.
Yeah, I think like a Braxton Garrett type makes sense as the third or fourth starter the Cardinals acquire, but
Yeah.
obviously not the one or two.
Yeah.
Jesus Luzardo, you could have sold me on as like a interesting, like he would have been the lowest end number 2 starter you could have sold me
Yeah.
on, but probably a really good number 3. But again, I don't see them trading him now. I think they could potentially trade a Garrett type or a Trevor Rogers type. If because
Rogers like isn't even a real person anymore.
yeah, that concerns
So
me.
bad.
So I'm out on the Marlins,
Yeah.
especially because I just don't think they're going to trade the pitching anymore. But then the value, I think you're trading for control when you need to trade for talent right now. Except for again Perez, Luzardo, Alcantara, but all 3 of those guys probably aren't on the table for various reasons. And then you kind of just I just don't think they make a lot of sense at this point. Now they did sign Johnny Cueto this past year. They could say, "Hey, we'll trade one of our guys, get a good young bat, and then we'll trade or sign a veteran starter." But yeah, I don't. That's kind of where I'm at with it. What do you think, Sandy?
Yeah. One more thing to say about the Marlins. I can't ever actually rule them out as a trade partner. And here's why. The Marlins have this pitching pipeline that for some reason just churns out talented young pitchers.
Yeah,
So I guess like, yeah, maybe we're sitting here and like there's some guy that they had that flew through some fall league and was incredible. And now I'm talking about on opening day being like, wow, Cardinals could really swing a late spring deal for this guy and it'd be really interesting. And like maybe at the deadline next year, there's some prospect they have that's super interesting. So yeah, like
yeah.
maybe. So I wouldn't like ever say I'd never trade with the Marlins. But also like right now, no, there's nobody there that to me is like, wow, we need that guy on our team.
Yeah, and again, if you're telling me Tyler O'Neill for Braxton Garrett type, I'm in.
Oh, I
Like you're
do that.
telling me Dylan Carlson to get
Absolutely.
something like this, obviously I'm in. But again, I
Yeah.
don't like if you're a Marlins front office, Dylan Carlson and Tyler O'Neill don't move the needle for your offense right now. So
Yeah.
again, I don't see the fit. Similar reasons why I'm out on the Mariners as a
Yes.
potential fit. Again, George Kirby, they're not trading. Luis Castillo, they're not trading. If Robbie Ray becomes available and the price
Only
is
guy.
different, I could be in on. I don't see that happening, but again, it's just not been talked about yet. Logan Gilbert, the price is going to be way too high. That's Lars Newbar and other things, or that's Nolan Gorman and Brendan Donovan. Like, I'm out. I like Logan Gilbert. He's a good 2, maybe. Right now, he probably will be a high end 2 at some point in his career, but am I giving up 40 home run bombs and Brendan Donovan? Or
No.
am I giving up Lars Newbar and I don't know, so JC? Like, no, I'm not doing that. So out on Logan Gilbert, and then for the same reasons why I'm not like I like Brian Wu a lot. I think he could be really good, but he's just not there right now. Maybe he's there next year. Maybe this looks bad, but again, I don't think I'm giving up my certainty with Brendan Donovan, Nolan Gorman, Lars Newbar for one of those guys, which is again the only reason the Mariners will do that deal. They Sure, they might take Tyler O'Neill as the third guy in a trade or second guy, or maybe they'll take Dylan Carlson in a similar type move. But to move one of their young pitchers, they're not moving it for uncertainty. I don't want to move certainty for their uncertainty. So I'm out on the Mariners. I like their pitchers. I like the idea of it. I just don't see how they come together to make a deal happen.
Yeah. And like, frankly, the Mariners, a lot like the Marlins, are an obnoxious organization because you have, like, I hate to say it, you have so many starters. Again, this year, they had Robbie Ray, they had Luis Castillo, George Kirby, Logan Gilbert, Bryce Miller, Brian Wu, Emerson Hancock. That's 7 like startable starting pitchers right
Yeah.
now. And you don't have an offense. How they can't put together an offense with all those guys, it tells me either like they're incapable of developing offensive talent, which might be true because they haven't, besides J Rod, who, like, I'm sorry, J Rod would have smashed in any organization. He's unbelievably talented. It's not a
Yeah.
special feat for the Mariners to have developed that guy. It's not like a Brendan Donovan who nobody knew existed and then was incredible.
Yep.
Um, it either tells me that, which that's probably true, or it tells me that they're just super greedy with their pitching, and that's probably what it is. The
Yeah.
Mariners aren't interested in moving anybody, which is crazy, especially with Dipoto, right? We talked about this a little bit before the show, but like Dipoto sometimes just makes trades to make trades.
Yeah.
The Paul Sewald deal this year, mind-bogglingly wild that they did that. They traded Paul Sewald for Josh Rojas and Canzone. Like,
Yeah.
what? And this is a guy like, so you're telling me he hasn't moved any of those starters? That means either nobody's interested in them or they're just not moving them for anything. And that's kind of what it seems like to me. So it's like, yeah, I'm not going to trade with them if they're going to ask for the sky for everything. They're going to ask for the entire world for Brian Wu. No, absolutely not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like honestly the way the Mariners handle their pitching is like how the Cardinals handle the offense, where they've invested high on Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, Wilson Contreras, and they also have developed all these guys. But the pitching, the development's bad, the investments have been bad. Pitching,
Yeah.
the Mariners have invested in Luis Castillo from trade and money. They invested in Robbie Ray, and they have all these young arms, but they cannot get the bats going. It's if you put them together, if you could put the Mariners pitching, the Cardinals offense, that's boom. We're cooking with
He's probably going to win a
gas
World
here.
Series at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't blame DePoto for not wanting to give up young pitching, but it means they need to go spend on the bats, and I don't know if they're going to do that. So if you're not going to spend on the bats, you probably got to trade, which is kind of where I was at the Cardinals midseason, where I just didn't really believe they were going to spend at the top of the market. So I was like, okay, they kind of gotta realize where they're at and they're going to have to trade someone. But now that they actually want to spend, this is the best case scenario
Hey,
because
I
you
love
keep
that.
your young core and you go get those pitchers. So we'll see. And then you have Goldschmidt comes off the books again. I think they bring him back, but that could be money that comes off. Michaelis, it comes off the books in 2 years. Matz comes off the books in 2 years. You have more money freeing up soon. Extensions need to happen, but I think it makes sense to go big right now. So that's the list of names that have been directly linked. There's a reliever from Japan, but I think we can save him for another time because we focus on the starters at this point. But is there one or two names, Sandy, that haven't been linked to them yet that you would like to see your yays? And maybe I give 2 yays myself that are off the radar here.
Yeah, for sure. So like we've talked about a ton of guys on this show,
Yeah.
right? It feels like every week we're talking pitching. But someone who's never been brought up on Newt News is Nate Pearson.
Okay.
So, Pearson was a staple in the Blue Jays top 10 forever. At one point cracked MLB Pipeline's top 10. Like a lot of people thought, wow, this guy is him. And then he was just like really bad the last couple of years. He's acquired some service time now. So he's going to be ARB eligible for the first time. It seems to me like the Blue Jays are just not interested in keeping him around. Yeah, this year he had a 4.85 ERA in 43 innings, but he got the whole year of service time. He's been out of the bullpen. He's not getting any starts anymore. They tried him as a closer for like a week. It really didn't go well. So, yeah, I don't know. I think the Cardinals should be interested in this guy. He has the prospect pedigree that nobody else in this system, at least like, except for the guys at the lower levels, like Roby, for example, but nobody who's coming up right now has that pedigree, right? So in my opinion, that would immediately throw him into the mix in spring training. He's also a little bit older. He's got some more experience and like the stuff's there. The change of scenery could be great for him. Also super cheap. He's only going to be worth, I think I saw $800,000 and I saw Blue Jays fans wanting to non-tender him this offseason.
That's crazy.
So like you could be talking about a guy that becomes a free agent. Nobody even seems like he's not on anybody's radar. Absolutely. Like I'd pay $1 million for him easily.
Yeah.
Like a $1.5 million deal. Yeah. That could be a guy that absolutely smashes. So I would love to have Nate Pearson.
I didn't see him as a potential non-tender candidate. So that changes it for me. If that happens, trade, I was like, I mean, sure, but nay, in theory, where I'm like, there's just other names out there. But you're making a compelling argument for a lot of it. I'll go to the trade market and maybe we each have a free agent potentially that would make sense unless you've got another trade you're really into. I will bring up Shane Bieber again. Again, this is a yay because I think the price is low enough that it makes sense to go after him, and he's a 1-year patch. I don't think of it yay as he should be your 1. Even 2, I'm kind of out on. Maybe I shouldn't be out on, but I'm not a huge fan of. But if you sign Nola, Gray, and then you trade for Shane Bieber, makes a ton of sense because he's not going to make in the 20 millions in arbitration, so he's not like a huge number. He probably fits what a number 3 would get in free agency money wise. And then I don't think you're giving up the world to get him either in a contract year. So maybe that's Tommy Edman, maybe that's Alec Burleson and Tyler O'Neill, Carlson type stuff like that. So you give the Guardians some offense or whatever they need. You get Shane Bieber. And this is where I really like the idea is that if you sign 2 guys long-term in free agency or long-term as in 2, 3, 4-year deals or more, Bieber helps fix 2024, and then you go into 2025 offseason needing to bring up one rotation spot again, which is doable. And that could be internal at that point to Roby, Tink Hens, someone like that. Or if it's not internal at that point, you can go out and sign another patchwork starter. So I like the idea of that because, again, I don't love the idea of trading the Hall for Dylan Cease, for all those other guys. So if I were to trade for someone this offseason, it's guys that are going to be free agents next year, like Tyler Glasnow, Shane Bieber, guys like that.
I really like Shane Bieber. He's like a Sonny Gray plus in terms of what he like the total output. Obviously, he's got much better strikeout stuff than Gray.
Yeah.
But super consistent throughout his career until like kind of a down year this year before the injury. But yeah, I love that idea. And yeah, he's probably a lot cheaper thanks to that injury.
Yeah.
On the free agent market, let's talk about Tyler Mahle. I am surprised he hasn't generated any buzz among Cardinals fans because I really like Tyler Mahle. I think it's just because he's been around longer than people think. So Tyler Mahle came up in 2017, was immediately really good, and then had a couple of down years where it's like, okay, he's going to be Cincinnati's 5 if he ever cracks the rotation, and then posted ERA pluses over the last 4 years of 137, 125, and 180 innings in 2021. And then split between multiple teams, ERA plus of 98. So that's a worst case scenario, your league average. And then 138 this year in limited innings because he's been injured. Going to be super cheap. The Twins didn't give up a ton for him from the Reds with control left coming off of good seasons. It's like Sonny Gray, where the narrative develops around him that he's not good and people seem to listen, especially fans. I haven't heard Tyler Mahle's name mentioned at all in anything. He's a free agent now. You could be looking at a guy whose AAV is like around $10 million a year, maybe. Like, I really do think you could get him on a Jose Quintana type deal where you're, but like less than that. The type of deal I thought Quintana would get, really, where you're talking like, okay, 2 years, $16.5 million.
Yeah.
Total. Yeah, if you can pay him less than Steven Matz, and by the way, Steven Matz is a bargain. I'll just say that. But if you can pay him less than $10 million a year in this current market where guys like Chris Bassett and Jose Barrios command AAVs upwards of $20 million,
yeah,
that's really great stuff because he's probably going to be a lot like Chris Bassett.
Yeah, I agree with that. Tyler Mahle makes a lot of sense. In my head, he goes with my free agent guys, Frankie Montas. And I think Tyler Mahle, so I could see him signing for the 2 to 3 year deal at a lower AAV, but I would probably bank on him signing a 1 year deal going into his age 29 season and trying to recoup his value and then go after more of a longer term deal in free agency. But again, even a really good Mahle season, I don't know if that gets him a huge bag. So I don't know how much that does for him. But then same with Frankie Montas. Again, he was a Cy Young type candidate in the American League, has really good stuff. Got traded to New York, things got a little off, and it seems like he already had the shoulder injury going into it. So I assume that the pressure and the shoulder injury really messed him up. Then again, missed this whole season, so he's going to hit free agency. I think he's a perfect bounce back guy. Again, he cannot be the top 2 option, but if he's the 3rd or 4th guy you bring into this rotation, makes a ton of sense in my opinion. Buy low, high upside. If he doesn't pan out, you wasted a 1 year, $12 million or whatever it is.
Who cares?
Who cares? So I'm in on that. Yeah. So again, we could go on for days. Shota Imanaga, Michael Wacha, James Paxton. Okay, now we're starting to get to the more the bottom of the barrel. But like, if I say James Paxton, we're probably in trouble here. But there's plenty of names. I'm sure by this time next week there'll probably be a couple more names linked to them. There's a lot going on. It seems like we're pretty in agreement on a lot of things, which is nice to see on that. But again, maybe to round this conversation out, Sandy, who do you like, if you're just guessing right now, what do you think are like the 2-3 guys they end up with?
So one thing I'm just going to say, if I'm the Cardinals, I actually think you need 4 starters, but that's just my thoughts. That's something we haven't really touched on, but like, I think you need 4. And if you need 4, I think it's going to be Sonny Gray. I really do think like the Cardinals, if everything goes right, Sonny Gray is a Cardinal by Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
In my opinion, like he's a guy you move early on in the offseason, boom, acquisition done.
Yeah.
I would love to see that. I think your number 2 is probably, I've heard a lot of talk around Nola and like a lot of it's official. So like, maybe it's Aaron Nola. I would love to see the Cardinals go Gray and Nola. And I do think it's likely. I think you can get someone on the trade market after that. I don't know. I would love to see Gray, Nola, and then some combination. Give me like 2 of 3 of Glasnow, Malley, and Montas.
Mm.
I think all 3 of those guys really check a lot of boxes for the Cardinals. So I think like 4 of those 5, I think the Cardinals really could be doing that.
Yeah, I love that idea. I think the only way they could potentially, in my opinion, get 2 top end guys in free agency and Glasnow is if the Rays eat money on the Glasnow's
Sure.
deal, because that's 25, it's probably 25 across the board. That's $75 million.
Yeah,
A
it's a
lot of
lot.
money. But again, maybe they eat some money, or they view it as, hey, 1 year we're going 75, but then we drop that 25 million for our books. Or honestly, I've kind of thought about this. Maybe the Rays would be interested in Steven Matz, like to swap some money. Because again, he's a guy that I feel like they can make him into a really good starter.
Yeah,
I
they
think he was
definitely
pretty
could.
good. So like they like approximate some of Glasnow's value by getting Steven Matz in return. They still free up money and they probably get Tommy Edman too or something like that.
Yeah,
Again, there's interesting ways to make it work. That's my ideal, though, would be to do Sonny Gray, Aaron Nola, and Tyler Glasnow. What I think is probably more realistic that I would go yes with would be if they did Gray, Nola, and then they traded for some random guy like a Braxton Garrett or something like
sure.
that. And sign like Tyler Malley or Frankie Montas or something
That'd be
like that.
great.
So we'll see. Um, I'm feeling pretty confident though that they're going to make some big moves. I would be shocked if they don't get one of Nola, Yamamoto, Gray, um, and Snell. I'd be shocked if they don't get one of those guys. I really do think they pretty Gray. I think is I sure things can happen, but it feels like Gray's a Cardinal, and then Aaron Nola feels like a
Hi, did
really
you get
good
me excited
option.
here?
So again, but it's too early to tell. Maybe there's another team that wants to throw the bag at Sonny Gray and agrees with us that he's really good, and the Cardinals back off a little bit. But I just think there's so many options that they are genuinely interested in that it might not be the exact pairing that everyone wants. Like some guys like Nola, some guys don't, some guys like Yamamoto, some guys don't. But I think if you look at all the names we said, I would be shocked if they don't end up with 2 of them. And I'd be very disappointed. So
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Truly last thought here. We're gonna close it out in a second. We're running long, but like if the Brewers started shopping some of their starters,
oh man.
would you overpay for like a Woodruff or a Burns? Would you like really overpay the way the Brewers would probably demand you overpay to trade within the division?
I think it depends on how the rest of the market's going. Like if you're missing out on guys and it's coming down and it's like I'm either going to get Corbin Burns or I'm going to go after Michael Wacha, like okay, like I'm going to overpay for Corbin Burns or Brandon Woodruff at that point. But I think if it's like overpay for Corbin Burns or overpay for Dylan Cease, I'm probably going to overpay for Dylan Cease, assuming
Sure.
it's a similar package because I'm not giving it to the Brewers. And I'm kind of, I mean, I think they're about to hit a dip here because they lost what's his face from the front office, David Stearns. I think it's a huge loss,
Yeah.
and they're probably going to lose Craig Counsell. Like, I think there's a big reckoning coming in Milwaukee right now. And even after the season,
Fun.
Christian Yelich was like, "Hey, we made the playoffs on a low payroll. This is what we do." Like, it's kind of amazing that we went this far. It's like even the players feel like,
Yeah.
"Oh, we're just skimping things. Who cares?" So
Yeah.
I don't see that lasting. I'd probably overpay actually on that Freddie Peralta because of the control you have with him. And I just like him a lot as a pitcher, but I think I'd say no in theory to the Brewers, assuming they probably want Nolan Gorman to make it happen or something.
Yeah.
But if it's like even if it's an overpay, but like a realistic overpay, like something that like if the Dodgers gave them, I'd be like that was a good deal, assuming they probably want more from us than they do the Dodgers, and
Sure.
so it's not insane. I'd do it. What do you think?
I mean, it's just something that doesn't get tossed around because who wants to send young talent to Milwaukee? But I don't know. I really do like you're right. The Brewers, it's a great seller's market, especially with so many guys coming off the market. You know, like
Yeah,
Urias not going to be available anymore.
yeah,
Shohei's not going to pitch next year. There's like there's a chance that if the Brewers say, "Hey, Corbin Burns, come get him. He's the best starter available."
yeah.
So, like they could really set the price. It's a great seller's market if the Brewers wanted to just disband their team, which I would really like. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Even if it's not the Cardinals, though, I think we all, I mean, not that just because we don't like all Cardinal fans want the Brewers to be bad, obviously. So I'm good with that. But
Yeah.
this will help their chances significantly at
Yes.
going after other starters. If the Dodgers are going after Burns instead, or if the Mets are going after Burns instead, or Woodruff,
Yeah.
like more, because obviously the Brewers aren't going to be hopping in on Tyler Glasnow or Aaron
Yeah,
Nola or
exactly.
Yamamoto. So if the Brewers are selling off guys, more options available for the Cardinals, even if it isn't those
Exactly.
guys. So, well, if you want a future Cardinal Corbin Burns jersey, you can go on Fanatics and go ahead and make your own there. Sandy, anything else you want to say on the way out, or?
No, it was a great episode today. Obviously, we're
Yeah.
talking pitching, pitching, pitching. That's probably going to be what we drive home all off season.
Yeah. And what's nice now is we're getting the names linked, but once the market starts to move, things will become
Yes.
clearer. And if the Cardinals make an early move like Sonny Gray, like you said, it'll be way easier to be like, okay, we know one of the names is in place. How does
Yep.
this string along? Right now, like, go after Aaron Nola, it completely changes who else you go after. Same with Sonny
Yep.
Gray, same with Tyler Glass. Like, you trade for Dylan Cease or Tyler Glass now, it changes the outlook. So right now it's kind of fun to speculate all of it, but I'm even more excited for the first move to happen or for some market movement to happen, because then it
Yeah.
becomes a lot clearer what things will happen. So until next time, though, I'm sure there'll be more news. The end of the season press conference got delayed from Monday, but it's delayed, not canceled. I keep seeing people say it's canceled. They're going to have it. Hopefully it's before the World Series, but they might be after the World Series. I'm sure there'll be plenty of stuff to talk about from then. But again, keep up with Derrick Gould's work. Keep up with Sandy and I and Redbird Rants. There's stuff coming out all the time. This should be an exciting offseason for once, and I'm excited to see how 2024 works out. So it's been another episode of the New News Podcast. We miss Andrew. He's taking a much needed break. He's been on the grind from things, so he'll be back soon. But thanks for catching this, and we'll see you next time.